Thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity to have me come out here again and speak to you guys. I really feel like this group that shows up every year, foresters and fire wardens, they're the SMEs that everybody else looks up to, the people that spend time on their own to come out here and learn how to be the best at the profession. Really, there's no greater accomplishment is to take your job so seriously that you care as much as you do. So thanks for having me. It appears that on the drive up here, we actually completed the transition that Southern California is now Portland. I've had just about enough rain, and just craziness. But I touched something sensitive there. Nice. Perfect. Starting off right. So this is the 91st annual, or not annual, I guess, because they've taken a couple years off due to COVID, 91st Foresters and Fire Wardens, is that correct? So what were the health and safety topics that they were talking about 91 years ago, Chief Hawkins? Man, we only pick on the guys we love.
Orange County guys are great, because I don't tell these guys that Local 3631 has a union contractor that allows teeth whitening every single day.
You guys can hate all you want, but dude, I'm telling you. Nice job. So who doesn't want to be the speaker right after lunch, right? And to talk about cancer too, it's like a double whammy. Nobody wants to be the cancer captain or the cancer speaker, and then having to come up right after lunch is a different challenge in and of itself. But just like it was said by the announcer just before I came up here, we bury a lot of guys to cancer. I buried my father when I was just out of high school. He retired out of the city of Long Beach. Now, I didn't make a connection because I was just out of high school. I hadn't even started college yet with deciding, what I was going to do with my life. But it took me a lot of years in the fire service doing things that I would be the poster child for don't do it like I did it. We're doing things differently now. We're just starting to do things differently now. And the whole Wildland incidents, that's another conversation that still needs to happen. Because the risk and kind of what we're going to talk about here, the risks for wildland smoke being an issue are real. And if we could say, there's some things that we should protect, and there's other things that we can't do to protect ourselves in these incidents. We're kind of burying our head on that. So I don't know what those interventions are. I'm lucky enough to be involved with the firefighter cancer cohort study where we're investigating not just the WUI and the wildland, so hand crew firefighters and WUI fire incidents, exposures and that science. But what do the interventions look like? What's feasible? What can work? So to me, it's intriguing because, I spent a few years on a Type 3, traveling all over the place, and I loved it. Actually, some of the most impactful fires that I was ever on in my career, pretty close to this place. Just all around here from just a lot of incidents, and I learned a whole hell of a lot. And so anybody that got involved in training and safety or training for your organization, definitely hold that person up to understand that caring for the other members in the profession is such a critical piece, and learning, continually learning for Well, we never stop, because I know there's a lot of retired guys in here, and you're still out here doing it and learning and trying to get better and pass it on to the younger generation, and that is very cool for sure. So we're going to talk about, smoke exposures, WUI, and Wildland. Chief Resende does such a fantastic job. His presentation on lithium-ion is money. I'm on the FireScope Cancer Prevention Subcommittee, as well as the Behavioral Health, and those two groups together with incident safety creates this safety specialist group. And we've been talking about this lithium-ion thing for a while. And I'm telling you, it's not going to go away. Obviously, it's only going to continue to get more and more, I don't want to say popular, but more prevalent for sure. Thanks, sir. You might need a spot up here by me to help me out throughout this thing. But the lithium-ion fires are legit. I have a good friend who's the deputy assistant chief of the FDNY, and they go on these things, 25 and 30 in a weekend. Those incidents are extremely toxic, just like Chief Resende said. And so my question, being that I work for our local and really work for our firefighters to protect their health and safety, my question is, how clean is clean with their turnouts? Are we sure that when we go on these incidents and when you get that thermal runaway, if you guys have seen these fires, you get a thermal runaway, which is like an acid gas. It's not a smoke. It doesn't look like smoke. It looks like the fog machine on Halloween. It looks very different. And then when it finally does ignite, it's that crazy fire where it's spitting out pieces of metal. It's insane looking. But that smoke exposure, my question was, what's going on there? What's sitting on our turnouts? And so we hired an industrial hygienist to test that stuff. And this is not in my presentation at all, but I had to jump on to a great job that Chief Resende did. There's a bunch of heavy metals that are lodged in your gear after these incidents. Heavy metal exposures are legit. You get that stuff in your body, and it's very difficult to get out of your body. Our department utilizes Hygenol wipes. It's not the cool name like Hero Wipes or Rescue Wipes or whatever. A wipe is a wipe is a wipe, right? Except for Hygenol. It's the only one that actually removes metal oxides off of your skin. Once that stuff gets into your skin and it mobilizes, it's much more difficult to get out. So the question was, we send our gear out to get cleaned in the extractor, retest it. We were finding that it wasn't it wasn't clean to the expectation we thought, right? So now we send all of our gear that's exposed to a lithium-ion fire to Texas to get a CO2 cleaning. And then we retest it again, and if it hasn't met the levels that's appropriate, it's hexafluorophosphate is the mineral or the metal that's on there that we're trying to use as our baseline. OSHA doesn't have a PEL for that, so we're trying to figure that out on our own. But we're trying to set the standard for safety for our people. And so don't necessarily look at some of the other departments and see what they're doing, because, many folks that don't have the resources of big departments, there's some smart people out there, very ingenious folks that can get good stuff done without big money resources or 1,000 members behind them. So trying to decide how clean is our gear, those are the steps that we're taking, and we're kind of laying a path on our own, because FDNY, they go on these things all the time, and their plan when they get somebody who has been exposed to this stuff is send your gear into an extractor and get it back and you're good to go, but what you don't know, you don't know. And so we're trying to do the right thing. Chief Resende doesn't look like he's still here. Love that guy's presentation and his passion. He does such a great job. So we're going to talk about a little bit about the presumption as well towards the end of this thing, and then some research that we're currently doing. So the scope of the cancer risk, I do this thing when we get a big group of people and we talk about the fact that if you have a family history of cancer, that it's a risk factor for you. if your brother or your sister or your father or so-and-so got cancer, right? That family history is a risk for you. And yet, if we had a showing of hands of firefighters that you know have had a history of battling or losing the fight to cancer, that's almost all of us. And that's the family history you guys should consider moving forward. We do have that risk. That risk factor is very real. 74% of the names added to the wall of honor, Colorado Springs, have been from cancer in the last few years. Actually, it was over 80% last year, which is when they finally added my dad's name. So we're going in the other direction. This is since 2002. It shows 61% of the names added to the wall of honor. You know, if we go back up here, when we were in training, we used to say that how many line of duty deaths is there about a year? And it used to be the number was like 100. And I think that 100 number had to have been from an acute injury, sudden death of somebody from cardiac or traumatic injury on the scene of an incident. But last year, there at Colorado Springs, there's 264 names added to the wall, and 211 were from cancer. So by adding that chronic illness to that death number, I mean, we're way over what we thought we were. So the Wildland risk assessment, for structural firefighting, our exposure is, well, I guess we're going to go with PPE first. We have multiple layered PPE, SCBA for respiratory protection, with your ability to remove contamination. By utilizing a post-fire washdown of our people, and I don't care if you use, Hygenol soap or if you use Dawn dish soap, for crying out loud, it doesn't matter to me. You can still remove about 85% of that polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon off the exterior of your gear. Just know that that's the exterior of your gear. The University of Arizona actually did a really good research piece where they showed that by following the interventions that included a washdown, using wipes, taking a shower within an hour, you actually, by doing all of those things, you removed about 40% of the risk of what you had going in, right? So by P-testing their people, you still got 60% of the dose, even by using, and we all know, of using SCBA, 100% use of your SCBA on a training fire or a structure fire. I won't use Wildland because nobody is using those currently on a Wildland incident. But you've had those incidents where you get good use with your SCBA, and you still smell like smoke for 3 days after. And that's a direct skin absorption thing that's working in your body. Your body is showing you that it's not just about your respiratory system. And I think for Wildland, that should be something that we consider. People want to leverage a Wildland control measure. What are we going to do about the respiratory piece? And, that remains to be seen. But the absorption risk is something that we can do something about. And we should be using wipes. We should be trying to get a shower every day or as soon as possible. Get your clothes clean, all those things that we just don't do. We don't do a very good job. And I know that when you have a big incident and you have laundry set up, you have showers, you have the ability to do it, but it's not always done. So if you use that as maybe build that into your day to try to protect your people, that's really critical. BDUs don't do a good job of protecting you from soot, and you go on a good brush incident, you might have a day or two of hotline construction where you're actually fighting fire, but for the most part, at least my experience on a Type 3, you're doing mop-up for 2 weeks. And that mop-up, your absorption risk is legit. Your legs are all black from that stuff crawling up your legs. Stuff is getting into your body, and the science shows very clearly that it's there. And do we do exposure reports for that? I mean, I talk all about this stuff a little bit later in the presentation, but just steps to look out for. Have the ability of your people to possibly document their own exposures too, because not everybody holds the same level of importance to those documentation piece. And just like somebody had said in the back, that even though that there's a presumption in California's labor code, you still have to prove exposure. And you can do that with an exposure report. So wildland fire incidents, right? It's a single layer PPE. BDUs don't do a very good job at holding back that PAHs. There's no respiratory protection that's widely used. You know, a bandana, it doesn't do very well. The difference between, say, an N95, if you look at OSHA, or NIOSH actually created an applied protection factor for respiratory protection. An N95 on that list, they rated it as 5. So something that was twice as beneficial as an N95 would be 10 on their list, right? A self-contained breathing apparatus is 10,000 on that list. So, I mean, it's a self-contained piece of equipment that recirculates positive pressure breathing air that's fairly clean depending on how it's getting filled. But the differences are pretty obvious. And I won't leverage a lot of my but the discussion about protecting our wildland firefighters just on respiratory protection, because there's a lot more to it. And a structure fire, you know, how long are you on scene of a structure fire? Even if it's a good fire, you're only going to be there a couple hours. And how often or how long are you really being exposed? Direct exposure, it's pretty limited. But everybody in here, I would assume, has been on a wildland incident where you're in the smoke for 2 weeks with no respite. So the level of protection is one thing. You know, on one end, it's less protective, and on the other end of exposure, it's on the other end of that spectrum. It's massive. So this is a good kind of segue to talk a little bit about the research piece. CPF is working to pass its AB 700. It's a legislation to get direct, participatory, community-engaged research for firefighters in the UC school system, to where we have the ability as firefighters to work directly with the science to figure out what's actually going on. And like, I have questions about what is that wildland cancer risk? Because those numbers aren't really widely talked about. What about male reproductive outcomes? You know, can the damaged DNA the damage that can be done to your DNA from exposures that cause cancer, damaged DNA be passed to an unborn child? I have a 29-year-old multiple disability kid, you know, and he was the easiest one I had to raise, for crying out loud. But that's another story. But, you know, I want to know these answers. And so the ability of getting this thing passed and working directly with the science of the UC school systems and firefighters getting questions answered, I think is critical. So I'm a believer in the science and the research piece, because that's the first step towards educating our people in prevention of occupational cancers. So the wildland and the WUI risk, very different with the diversity of fuels, the resulting products of combustion, PPE, you guys can read that stuff. Another thing that Chief Resende was talking about was those with the electric vehicle fires. We had a recent incident in Orange County here last year or 2 years ago called the Coastal Fire. It's up of Pacific Island Drive, overlooking the mighty blue Pacific Ocean. Beautiful homes. I think they lost, I forget how many houses. How many? 7 homes. You know, I think the assessed value for structures lost had to be in the $50 million. Like, I mean, each house was very valued very high because they all had a bitchin' view of the ocean. Well, a lot of those people that live in those houses in that neighborhood have what kind of cars? They all have the fancy Model S, not those cheap Model 3s, right? They have the really nice Teslas. And we had a whole division in that neighborhood, Division Mike, that were in that smoke with no protection for, a full day and a half. And they're breathing all that stuff. And when Chief Resende said that the smoke that comes off a lithium ion fire is very toxic, it's almost an understatement. Hydrogen fluoride is extremely toxic. It actually, even turnouts really don't protect you from that absorption, exposure. And hydrogen fluoride actually seeks out the calcium in your bones. So we had some really scared people, right? And so when they came back and the first thing, hey, what are we gonna do? And I said, well, the first thing, just do an exposure report, because we haven't identified what we're gonna do differently. And I think Chief Resende is trying to be okay and start the conversation that it's okay to let that thing burn, get away from it. When we had our first one, and we flowed 30,000 gallons to try to, get at the underside, and it rekindled after rekindled. It rekindled after it got up on the flatbed, for crying out loud. Just extremely toxic. We had one of our guys recently retire out from one of those lithium ion fires due to kidney failure after that exposure. And I know that lithium ion isn't really the cancer risk, but it's an exposure risk, and kind of that's where I hang my hat and what we talk about. So the duration of exposure is legit. These days to weeks for sure. The exposure to carbon monoxide and dust, silica, whether you're on the line or even sometimes in base camp, you're still getting dosed with that stuff. And the burning phases of a wildland incident, you can have many different phases of the fire all going at once. So as you're moving through those areas, you could be literally exposed to just a number of bad things that whatever we can do to protect ourselves, to get ourselves clean and be okay with our people getting clean, it's critical for sure. In the initial phase, as the fuel heats up, you actually have VOCs. I went to our hazmat station and I just brought some sampling of I use sage, mustard, and eucalyptus, and then we burned like that high density foam from a headbed. It's just nasty foam rubber, I was surprised to see the amount of bad stuff, VOCs included, that came off of, the organic material. And that used to be a question, right? It's just like a campfire. How bad can it really be? Well, it's bad enough. Try to avoid the smoke if you can. And how are we going to do that? There's a great report that's done by the Department of Interior talking about the risk for wildland firefighters and their respiratory risk. And I think at the end of the paper, their suggestion is, limit mop-up. Stay out of the smoke. I'm thinking, oh, well, thanks for the heads up. I just can't imagine how we're going to fix that. But when AQMD has certain restrictions for people working outside when the air quality index is a certain level, and that particulate matter that they measure is oftentimes could easily be from a wildland incident, fire in the area. It pertains to everybody, and you're liable if you're outside and you have your people working in that area, except firefighters are not in that, right? But we're human like everybody else, and yet, obviously they're not gonna come out and find the firefighters who are trying to put out the fire, but you just gotta understand that for everybody else in the world, they say, be very careful, in breathing this stuff if you have any respiratory issues, or don't work hard. When Cal OSHA and NIOSH put these numbers for the maximum exposure limit for certain types of chemicals. You know, they're not measured in ways to where you load up a kid who's 25 years old with 70 pounds of hose and water and tools on their back, and then walking up and down hills in that smoke for 8 hours straight. There's no, like, they don't even see that as a connection. And yet, that's the realm in which we work. So, understanding that the exposure is real, even if it's organic, is critical. So the flaming phases of fire, you know, you're going to get CO2, nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide. You got a bunch of bad stuff in the smoke as it is flaming. The decomposition phase of the fire, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, hydrogenated or oxygenated VOCs, you know. Something to consider too, you know, when we build our plan for our crew, whether it's a single engine crew or maybe even a division, and somebody's doing the risk assessment for the job at hand that you're asking your people to do, and you're building out safety zones and escape routes, and you maybe build your escape route for the weakest person on your team, right? So that you have enough time when the crap hits the fan and it's time to bail, you're going to be able to get everybody out safely. Should you consider, if we're in the smoke heavy, can that affect your ability to think clearly and act decisively? Build that into your plan. You know, protect your people, not just when you're back at camp and you say take a shower and here, use these wipes. You know, build that into your plan for when you are doing a risk assessment and how to protect your people during LCES. Just something to consider. So there's good research out there that talks about, you know, the compounds that are in smoke. And for me, that number one thing is the fact that just because it's organic doesn't mean that it's okay. There's plenty of compounds that are in that smoke that we want to avoid the best we can. Training our folks on the health hazards of smoke is critical to ensure the safety of our folks. And just having that conversation with them in getting clean, like, I don't know what that is, the holdup with getting that through our heads, but we definitely have some of our most seasoned folks on the crew side are still okay with just never washing their stuff. You know, I guess on the structure side, we're getting better at talking about, hey, do you really need to have the dirtiest crap? Like, it's not cool anymore. At least in our organization, it gets talked about, you know. I have never really mentioned to our folks, or I never really put two and two together that where I get skin cancer now, it's right where my helmet thing rested on my forehead. It's the only place I've get them. And it's a work in progress. But training at all levels of the organization, we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. There are direct consequences regarding the ability of firefighters to remain safe. You know, think clearly, act decisively. Our goal is to function at the highest mental and physical level. Now, the research piece that we're trying to learn more about the firefighters, not just in the Wildland area, not just in WUI, but there's a bunch of different offshoots from fire trainers, live fire training, investigators, and in all of these risks, every ethnic background has a different risk as well. So Hispanic firefighters have a different, their body reacts differently to that exposure, and the DNA methylation is different result for a Hispanic firefighter than a Caucasian. And African American firefighters, we haven't even started looking at what's actually going on with different ethnic groups. Female firefighters have there's a whole research piece right now on their hormones. I'm sure that's going to lead to a joke somewhere. But the AMH, which is the anti-Müllerian hormone, which is ovarian reserve, and their ability to have children is really affected by this job. And that's something that we should at least talk about. I think the more the science can tell us, the more we can identify, what we can do to mitigate those risks, or at least understand them a little bit better. I'll tell you, at first, I wasn't sure. I wanted to know that if something I did or in my job, or if my job led to my son being diagnosed with his disability. But yet, we got to learn that stuff. I mean, that's how we're going to protect the people in the future. But it is what it is, and I really am a firm believer in the science can help us rather than tell us something we don't necessarily want to know. So the goal is to obtain post-job assignment urine samples. This was on the WUI side, and now we're currently doing it on our hand crew as well. It's a lot easier to go to a prescribed burn or even fire school down in Camp Pendleton, where you can have the hand crew guys pee in a cup after an exposure, and then we can actually send this stuff off to the University of Arizona for a metabolized PAH to see what's actually going on in those wildland firefighters. The best research assistants are the firefighters themselves. It used to be they sent a couple of us lucky people with the pee cups. We had to go out on a wildland incident and track people down, and some of these incidents are pretty big. I mean, the Mendocino complex, I was on that thing, and I swear just my division for safety, or the branch, it was like 30 miles long. So to meet the right people at the right time and collect urine at the right intervals, it's important to be able to get your crews established with the tools that they need to help you out as well. And there's some great research from Kat Navarro, both of these. Kat Navarro was the primary investigator on these, where, so she was a propeller head scientist kid that wanted to understand and study wildland firefighters. So what does she do is she gets a job with the Type 1 hand crew. As she was out on the line doing her work, she was also conducting some field experiments and doing some really good research projects. So Kat Navarro, if you ever want to look her up, she's done some good things to show what's actually going on in the wildland firefighters. So the biomarkers of effect, this is done by the University of Arizona, Dr. Jeff Burgess. He's the primary investigator for the firefighter cancer cohort study. Human that really is the firefighter risks on cancer. And what he did here is they were checking the blood and the DNA from brand new firefighters that have never been exposed to the job. And what they have here are these, when they're checking the genes, right, their microRNA, you have oncogenes, which are those things that reduce your body's, or it increases your body's ability to fight off getting a tumor, right? Excuse me. Oncogenes are those things that create tumors in your body, whereas a tumor suppressor resists tumors from actually occurring. So they check a brand new firefighter that's never been exposed to this job, and then after 2 years they retest them, and they see that those tumor suppressors are diminished, and your oncogenes are overexpressed after just 2 years. Now, whether that is, we don't know what causes that. And I think every result like this only raises more questions. Like, is it the sleep disruption? Because the sleep disruption is a very legitimate issue that's wearing our people down and can cause issue with a cancer risk later in life. Or is it the exposure to PAH or the diesel? I mean, who knows? So 2 years is all it takes that you can already see a change in your body that increases your risk for getting a cancer. And so what do we do when we're exposed, whether it's to AFFF, whether it is to a smoke exposure, be it car fire, electric car fire, trash fire, wildland incident, structure fire, is do your exposure reports, because you will have to prove that you are exposed to a cancer-causing agent, even though the state of California has the best verbiage for their presumptions, and many states don't have as clearly stated presumptions as we do. And by the way, don't assume that because that there is a firefighter cancer presumption that you're going to be covered if you ever get diagnosed with cancer or have a cardiac issue or those other 11 things that was mentioned, because your department can easily turn that stuff down, which we are the experts to turning down presumptive cancers on our job. And we're not the only ones. And I heard it directly from a department administrator that it's not a personal decision to turn that down. It's a business decision. And so just think about that. Because the person who's got cancer and that has always believed that it's presumptive and that I got cancer, like, shouldn't that be covered? It's a business decision. The business decision is to save money. And that guy was afraid of dying because it was spreading throughout in a scary moment for him. So anyway, it went to a jury trial and he ended up getting it won. But that's not what people think. Our people, that's not what they believe that a presumptive law is supposed to do for them. So recommendations, how are we going to utilize, fire operations and procedures to reduce smoke exposures, right? We can certainly rotate crews, but it's going to take doing something a little bit differently. And we suck at that. I mean, it almost feels like if you're going to take a different tactic for anything, whether it's transitional attack on a structure fire or trying to, get your first due company out so they can get a shower first, keeping them available while they go back and take a shower, having holding switch with the other crew that's actually doing the burning, doing something different. Huevos, and sometimes it feels like you're doing something wrong by doing something different, even when you're trying to protect your people. But if you can leverage that decision on looking out for them and their families, you're going to be money ahead for sure. So, of course, pretty intuitive. Locate camps and the incident posts in the areas upwind. In some of these areas, it's just impossible because there's a lot of these fire incidents you go on that the ICP is the same spot every time if you have a geographical area, because it's not easy to establish a big base camp. It takes a lot of infrastructure. You got to have a lot of space. And sometimes it's impossible, but just keep that into consideration. Avoiding skin contact, wet areas to reduce ash, pretty obvious. That's what we're trying to do, but it just takes us 2 weeks. And then training your people, key point, right? Minimize mop up if that's possible. Develop a medical surveillance program where we can actually check our people and the exposures that they may be incurring. We are working, on the CPF and the Firefighter Cancer Cohort study. We're working to try to develop wildland occupational exposure limits. Training, critical point for our firefighters for everything, whether it's just those unexpected changes to the fire behavior. It's the same for training for those, the chronic exposures that we're exposed to. We spend a lot of time on the structure side training our people for firefighter survival tactics, and it's important. You got to know how to do a ladder slide. You got to know, what does lunar stand for? How am I going to tell somebody where I'm at and what I need? And yet, we very rarely train on the things that are putting a lion's share of the names up on the wall. We don't do training in decon. Granted, we're just now starting to do it. And even when we do it, I hate to say half-assing it, but half-assing it. If we're not on air, there's a reason why we suggest if we're brushing that stuff off there, you probably don't want to breathe that. So it's a change. It makes it difficult or more difficult and a challenge to change how we do our business. But the reasoning is backed by science for sure. And if you've ever held a hand of a brother as they were dying of cancer, that's definitely a lesson that I wouldn't pass up. It's hard as hell, but it'll get you to care about their family and the other people that you work with moving forward. So maybe, at some point they'll say, mop up 50 feet instead of 300 feet, but we'll see how that goes. That's one of those changes that we've always done it the same way, and we have that same expectation, and I get it. When firing, maybe rotate individuals between firing and holding. So I have the opportunity in FireScope to work in the cancer prevention subcommittee, and it was just stood up this year. And when we came in and had our first meeting, and I said, if you guys want a list of best practices, this ad hoc committee is going to be done today, because everybody has a set of best practices. The real question is, how come those best practices aren't usually taken up? They're not really supported in a way from the ground to the top of an agency. And so the answer amongst our group is the NIOSH hierarchy of controls, where they're mostly $0, really personal decisions that the individual can make to protect themselves. It's a different way of thinking about protecting themselves. More non-emergency decisions, so to speak, because you're not going to be able to eliminate smoke exposure. You can't substitute the exposure to PAHs when you're on a wildland incident, because that stuff's going to happen. So the hierarchy of controls, right? What's the least effective thing that we have is PPE. And that's really all we use. It's all we got, right? And that's the least effective thing that can protect you, right? Administrative controls would be changing the way people work. So an example of that could be alternating from a smoky area or holding to firing. Just getting the people kind of out of the smoke by rotating, changing the way they work. Isolating people from the hazard could be moving out of the smoke if possible, right? Replacing the hazard. I liken that to like if you're doing training fires, rather than burning OSB, switch to either a clean wood or a soundboard, something that's less toxic than something that's made with glue. And then elimination, what about the idea of, for a portion of the day, parking your vehicle, parking the apparatus outside, or even using the Plima vent in a way that captures the diesel exhaust 100% of the time, rather than driving it in and then connecting it. When I wrote the policy for our organization on the diesel exhaust capture systems, I literally followed what the manufacturer's suggested use was, right? Where they pull up, you stop before you come into the station, and then you plug it in out there, and you drive in. So you get more capture. In the union, who I so humbly work for now, they were so pissed that I was suggesting having one of our people be more exposed than everybody else, because they had to get off and connect that thing. All I was going off of what the manufacturer said to use it, and the idea is we want to get as much capture of the stuff as possible. All of our turnouts are in wide open lockers in the app room. So even if you are coasting in or just driving in and with the doors open, you still have a certain level of diesel particulate, which is a group 1 carcinogen, that's contaminating your gear. A lot of stations have PT gear in the app room. That's probably not the place you want to go to get hot and sweaty. Speaking of hot and sweaty, that's another thing that we're struggling with right now, and everybody wants the infrared saunas. I get that conversation a lot. And if AB 700 passes, we're going to do a better research piece on that, since the only other non-industry created research if I'm trying to sell a sauna and I call something a research project, it's not as legitimate as something that's done by science and it's unbiased about what the results are. But the only published document on that only had like 12, so it's a very small set, of folks that they were able to test with this. But I get a lot of pushback. I get a lot of people, even in the local that I'm for now, because they want to support the use of infrared saunas for cardiovascular health of our people. And I said, my thought is I'm going to have this conversation about absorption risk forever. Do they really belong in the fire station? I don't know. It's not my decision to make. Let somebody else make that decision. But I'd rather not have that conversation over and over and over. The science says that as your skin temperature rises, your skin temperature increase by 5 degrees increases your absorption by 400%. So I'm not sure, it seems intuitive, right? I'm going to go into a sauna and I'm going to sweat the bad stuff out. And the science is telling us that the stuff that's already in your body, because the University of Arizona already presented that stuff that's metabolized into your system, that you will mobilize that, but it doesn't come out in your sweat. You mobilize it from your fat to other areas of your body. And it seems intuitive, but rather than have that conversation over and over and over, I still get people reaching out saying, hey, we want to get a sauna because we want to detoxify after fires. And it's like, man, I wish that would just go away, but I think that's just going to be something that never does. It's always going to be the conversation. Even in my organization, like I said, the union who I work for, they thought I was backstabbing them because, whatever. I don't agree with them. I don't want to have to keep saying no. Just say no once, just let it go. But whatever. There's plenty of other benefits for that. But for firefighters in the fire station, I'm just not sure that it's right for us. And I know that anybody from our organization knows people that have been flown out off the hill from a wildland incident from dehydration or heat-related symptoms. We're not great at hydrating ourselves. Actually, we did a really great hydration study a number of years ago with our exercise physiologist at the time and one of our battalion chiefs. Actually, he was a WFIT coordinator at the time. He was not a battalion chief. Anyway, it was a hydration study where we had all our wellness fitness, pure fitness trainers come in, and then we put them through the paces after they swallowed this pill to see what their hydration really was. And 90% of the WFIT guys that came in, they were all dehydrated coming in, right? So we just haven't in the history, in our past, done a very good job at hydrating. And so now we want to have infrared saunas at the stations to maybe increase that whole thing. So survivorship. There's a great article by Brian Frieders regarding, how to have that conversation. And all I'll say is, there's a potential for any leader in these organizations to get a call from somebody, say, hey, Cap or Chief, I just got diagnosed with cancer. What should I do? Know what to do. So that's some training that you could do on your own, that you could have a plan for where to get resources. If your first word out of your mouth is, oh, that sucks, that's not stepping off on the right foot. And that leadership persona should be, I don't know where this is going to take us, but I'm going to be right there with you. And any answers that I don't have, I'm going to get them for you, and I will be there for you every step of the way. Because nobody has those answers. I received a few of those phone calls, and I'm telling you, they catch you off guard, and it's a pivotal moment for that person to reach out and ask for help. The last guy, we just buried my Thule a couple of months ago, and he called me. I had my son out. I was driving down to the beach to get him out of the house. And he said, hey, I'm sitting in the parking lot of the doctor's office, and he just said, I have liver cancer. I need to find the best doctor available for this? And I said, oh man, well, I got you. I have some resources. I have some ins at some, comprehensive cancer centers that I can contact, and we're going to find a good path for you. What else did the doctor say? And he said, I got to tell you, the doctor said I had liver cancer, and then he talked for probably another 45 minutes, and he said, I didn't hear a goddamn word he said. He said, I literally could see his mouth moving, and all I could think of is, what about my daughter? Am I going to die from this? What about my job? I love my job. He said, I didn't hear a word he said. He goes, I don't even know when my next appointment is. I literally walked out and I called you from my car. I'm still sitting in the parking lot. That's something that you should prepare yourself for. Have an idea of how you're going to respond to that person, because a lot of our people get that call. And you just don't want to start off with oh, that sucks. Because it does suck. But it sucks worse for him or her than it does for you at that moment. And what he needs is somebody who's going to stand by him or her the whole way through and help him out. That's the key. The Firefighter Cancer Support Network has some good survivorship resources, as well as the University of Miami survivorship program through their Firefighter Cancer Initiative. You guys are never going to remember this, but I'm telling you what, University of Miami has a phenomenal program for survivorship. It's the best one in the country, I'd be willing to bet. The National Firefighter Registry is something that just kicked off. I tell you, this has been years in the working. This is created by CDC and NIOSH, Kenny Fent, who put this together. This is not a firefighter cancer registry. This is for any firefighter, active or retired, to be able to put some information in there and then find out what's actually happening to firefighters as they go through their career. There's nothing else needed other than a periodic update to that questionnaire that comes out. In the past, when you see some of these graphs that show how cancer has grown exponentially over the last 20 years, most firefighters, by the way, age is a risk factor for getting cancer, right? The older you are, the greater your chance of getting a cancer, right? IAFF has actually published, it said that 77% of firefighters that get cancer, it happens after age 55, okay? Previously, when you filled out documentation or you're retired and you get cancer and somebody looks through that database for, what occupations are causing the most cancer, if you're retired, it shows you as retired, not a retired firefighter. So this is the first step right here. You can scan that or take a picture of that if you want, to really help quantify and document what this job actually does for active and retirees. It actually shares that information with the research so that we can continue to keep studying so that we can learn as much as possible to reduce cancers in our folks. It took forever to get going, too. I mean, it's been years since that was actually signed into law, but Kenny Fent did a great job at putting that together. So the presumptive disability law, this is right out of 3212 in the labor code. It doesn't say in California that it has to be a certain type of cancer. It just says cancer. It doesn't say that you have to be a firefighter for 10 years. It just says if you're a firefighter and you get cancer, it should be presumed to arise out of the course of your employment. But it can be disputed by evidence, right? But some departments don't need any evidence to turn you down because it's a business decision sometimes. Some departments have literally a 1%. If we can prove 1% that it was caused by your job, you're going to be covered. But those are few and far between. We have many of our folks that have had to go long, drawn-out legal battles to get that approved. So some of our lawyers now through the union will tell somebody who's been diagnosed, don't even bother filling out your documentation for a DWC-1 workers' comp injury. Get treated, take care of you. And when you're ready to fight, when you're healthy and you're ready to fight, then we'll go back after them and we'll get it back later. But when you are sick and the doctor's saying maybe it's metastasized and you got to go to this oncologist, you got to get this kind of treatment, you got enough stuff on your plate than to deal with, wait, I can't see the doctor I want to see, or I was turned down for this reason or that reason. Like, that's not the time that you want to go through that. You want to focus on your health first. And so some of our lawyers are kind of using that approach right now. So the presumption is disputable. Assembly Bill 1127 was just passed this last January that says basically a department or an organization only has 75 days now to make a decision or a determination whether your workers' comp claim will be accepted or not, which is good. If they turn it down within that 75 days without reasonable cause, like without evidence that something else caused that cancer, they can be held liable for 5 times the claim or $50,000. But if it truly is a business decision, $50,000 is a lot less than what a cancer claim is going to be. Very often, nearly $1 million if you're going to have a long, drawn-out fight. But it's something that the CPF actually pushed forward. They were originally asking for $100,000, but $50,000 is better than nothing. And to reduce the amount of time, the idea is to reduce that time and then have a reason for that they're going to deny you that claim. There should be some reasonable cause. And so you get presumptions for firefighters once you retire as well. Currently, you earn 1 year of post-retirement presumption for every 4 years you work, for a maximum of 10 years post-retirement, which means you'd have to work 40 years to get that 10 years. And if most firefighters are going to get it later in life, you're going to use every bit of that. And I'm a firm believer that just because you fall outside of that presumption right now doesn't mean that you couldn't establish a legal battle to get a cancer claim approved, even if you're outside of that. Because there's very good science that's out now that shows firefighting causes cancer. You can easily establish a link to those toxins. It's just not going to be the presumption because many of our presumptions are denied anyway. So I wrote a resolution with the CPF. It was just passed at this last convention that basically I'm trying to decrease the amount of time that it takes you to earn those presumptions and increase it to 15 years. So it would basically be half of that. So for every 2 years of surface credit, you get 1 year post presumption. This is not the law yet. This is something that was written that they still need to go to battle for legislatively. Anyway, the maximum would be 15 years. So that's the goal because that's going to cost money because that's when folks are going to get sick. By the way, I didn't mention this either. That's my Thule sitting right there at the base of the wall in Colorado Springs. We went on a motorcycle ride this summer where we went to Man Gulch, South Canyon Fire, Yarnell. And Mike went with us while he was battling liver cancer. As a matter of fact, he called me before. I was terrified that he was going to go with us because he was sick. He was sick. He said, hey, the day I was supposed to leave, we're meeting in Kalispell to start this ride. He goes, the day I'm supposed to leave, he goes, the doctor just says he found 12 more lesions on my brain, so I got to get radiation treatment the day I'm supposed to leave. And I was like, well, man, you really tried hard to make it, but it's obviously you can't go. And he was like, I'm going, I just have to leave a day later. And he left a day later and rode from Santa Margarita to Kalispell in 2 days, which is legit. Anybody that talk about iron pants, like that guy made it. But I'll tell you what, that's where he ended right there. When we got there to the wall and it was stormy, blustery, he sat there at the wall all by himself. It was a tough moment. And that's where he quit. He shipped his bike home and he flew home from there, but and he's going to be added to the wall this year.
Ralph and I met just a few months before we both turned 18 years old. These pictures were taken very early on in our relationship, and even though we were both really young, I knew almost instantly that he was the one. This picture was taken on the night that he graduated from the Coral Springs Fire Academy, and he was given the award for being the top recruit in his class. And even then, he was starting to catch the eye of some more seasoned members of the fire service because they were recognizing not only the massive potential that he had, but seeing the genuine heart and just the kind of person that he was. This picture was taken on the day that he graduated from the City of Miami Fire Academy. This was the department that he knew he wanted to work for from the second he decided he wanted to answer his vocation and become a paramedic and a firefighter. And we were just so incredibly proud of him. He was beaming this day. He was so happy. This picture was taken of us on the night that he proposed to me. He got down on one knee and he asked me if I would spend the rest of my life with him. Little did we know that really he would be spending the rest of his life with me and that I would have to go on without him. This picture was taken of us in front of the fire truck on the night of our wedding. It was such a special night. It was full of so much fun and so much love. Everybody could see how happy we were. This picture was taken at our 12-week ultrasound of our baby boy, our first child. And if you look closely, you can see it's a little handprint. It looks like he's waving. Ralph loved this moment so much. I actually ended up printing this out and framing it and laying it in his coffin. This picture I took on my phone on the day that he woke up with some nausea and a headache and dizziness, and I dragged him to the urgent care, thinking that it was probably dehydration or a stomach bug. And he was complaining a little bit, so I took this picture to bother him. And neither one of us could have imagined what was actually going on. This is a picture of his brain tumor. It's this white area right here. I remember holding his hand while the doctor broke the news. And it was the first time that I really saw fear in his eyes. And he was trying to hold back the tears for me because I was 7 months pregnant. This is the last picture that I have of Ralph still smiling. We were transferring to the University of Miami Hospital. His friends had left this silly balloon for him, and he was dragging it through the halls. We still hadn't given up hope at this point. This picture ended up replacing my maternity photo shoot that we never got to have. It was actually scheduled for the day that ended up being the day that he was buried. He was already brain dead at this point, and I asked the nurse to do me the favor and remove the wires from his hands so that I could put his wedding ring back on and hold his hand over my belly so that I could get a picture of the three of us. This was taken on the day of his burial. I remember walking behind that coffin draped in the American flag, down the same aisle that I walked on the day of our wedding to meet my handsome groom with so much life ahead of him. This was the day that I met our beautiful baby boy, Mason. And Ralph couldn't be there. This was the only way that I could include Ralph in Mason's newborn baby photos, because he couldn't be there. His baptism, first Halloween, first Thanksgiving, first Christmas, first birthday, second birthday, first day of preschool. Ralph couldn't be here for any of these moments. Not physically, anyway. He knew the risk that he was signing up for when he decided to become a firefighter and a paramedic. But he was not educated enough on the kind of risk that he was taking on when it came to cancer. And I know, with every fiber of my being, that if he had truly known of any precautions that he could have taken to be present for any of these moments, that he would have done it. It's not about trying to completely change your culture. It's not about trying to give you yet another burden that you have to carry, having to worry about cleaning your gear or whatever the case may be. It's about keeping you safer. It's about keeping you around longer. For your wife, for your husband, for your son, for your daughter, for your parents, for your family. Let's not let Ralph's death and the death of all the other firefighters who have been defeated by cancer be in vain. Let's learn something. Let's listen. Let's do something. Please, from the bottom of my heart. My name is Megan Garcia, and I am the proud widow of Lieutenant Rafael Garcia. Thank you for listening.
That might have been a miscalculation on my part to put that in there. That's a tough one. That's my reason why. That's my father. Oh yeah, sorry. He's my why I continue to talk about this stuff. But just like Megan said, it's about taking care of yourself and your people and their families. I can't imagine that there's too many questions. Since I'm right on my time, if there are any questions, let me know. Sorry. If there's any more questions, perfect. Hey, thanks again for your time, you guys. I appreciate it.